Hi, so I'm presenting on emotional regulation and its interaction with executive function. Okay, so before we dive into like what it means to be dysregulated versus regulated, I wanted to briefly overview the nervous system, and it'll be relevant, I promise. Sorry to force some biology on you, but okay, so we talk about the like cranial nerves, right? So the central nervous system, we talk about that a lot in speech. Um, and outside of that, there is the peripheral nervous system, everything else. And within the peripheral nervous system, there is the autonomic nervous system. Okay. And it controls like all of your organ function and involuntary and other like involuntary behaviors, right? So within the autonomic nervous system, you can break that down further into the sympathetic nervous system. So the sympathetic nervous system is what is like, oh my God, danger, ah, okay, and it raises your heart rate and it raises your blood pressure and your body's like trying to like breathe and get oxygen in and like stress hormones like survive this situation, okay? And when all that stuff is happening, the flip side of that is that we're slowing down or pausing some of those like non-essential functions like digestion and other stuff that's just not important for in the moment, like responding to a situation, responding to some kind of environmental stressor. Okay, so how does that have anything to do with like being regulated versus being dysregulated? Okay, so you become emotional. Something in your environment creates like an emotional response in you, okay? And while it's happening, your sympathetic nervous system is taking over, okay? And like I said already, your heart rate is raised. You're releasing all these stress hormones. You're trying to survive and deal with whatever's going on, okay? And maybe that would be useful if you actually did need to survive something, but when you're just like trying to give a presentation, having like a really high heart rate and being like, breathing really quickly and talking fast is not the best thing for you, but it doesn't matter because your body is still having that response. Um, as opposed to being regulated, right? Where you are breathing calmly and you have a normal heart rate, and you're like responding normally to to your environment. Okay. So, I kind of already referenced emotion, but I wanted to give sort of a model for how we experience emotion. Uh, because I've already been talking about like the physiological component of being regulated. So this is one model of emotion. There are others. A lot of them are really similar to this model, though, and this is what I was taught in undergrad. So basically, the idea is that you have some kind of environmental stimulus. So a bear, or like, I don't know, this story that my mom tells all the time about like, she was like out pushing her little push mower, mowing the yard, and she like wasn't paying attention. I mean, she was probably like kind of zoned out mowing, doing her repetitive physical task. And she just like screamed and like backed off. She was like, wait, what? Why did I do that? And then she looked and there was a snake like a little ways ahead of her, just like a little garden snake. But she sort of like unconsciously had that physical reaction even before she was consciously like, there's a snake, I am in danger. Ah. So that's what this model is saying. So we have like the bear, the snake, whatever, and that will cause a physiological response such as like backing off or jumping, like a startle response or raised heart rate or raised blood pressure or like a gasp, right? And then after that occurs, your mind is like, yo, like, why did I scream? Why did I jump? And it's like, oh, it's because I'm scared. Because there's a bear that a bear is scary, right? And then some other models say that those two happen simultaneously. Anyway, this is based on an experiment that actually took like, and of course it was men, took like two groups of men and injected like one with adrenaline and it had them like both groups go through different kind of like environmental context. So I think they like watched an upsetting film and then asked them to like explain their emotions based on that. And they even, it was like kind of sketchy, had like an attractive person interview them with some like BS psychology questions, which wasn't what they were actually testing. They were testing their attributed emotional response. And like out of the two groups, the ones who were given adrenaline reported way more feelings of like being angry at the film that they watched, or being like, "Ooh, I was attracted to the interviewer," which is like sketchy. But this was actually done in like the 60s. Anyway, moving on. Just like psychology. Sorry. So more psychology, executive functions, right? We talk about these all the time. Um, and we know that they have a relationship with emotional regulation, and it makes sense, right? So, like your logical part of your brain, right? How does that deal with emotions? Well, we've pinpointed like, and I have some references down here, but some of the initial research was done by that Mike I don't know, sorry. And then this information actually comes from a chapter written by those first two authors. So we've found that some of the primary parts of executive function, because it's a group of different cognitive processes, but we found that like the three primary ones are inhibition, updating, and perspective taking. So if we talk about this in reference of like a board game, right? We have Thanksgiving, maybe you'll play board games with your families. uh, so inhibition would be like controlling your impulses. So like low inhibition would be like storming away because you lost the game, or like flipping over the board. Like little kids will sometimes just be like, "I didn't lose. What are you talking about?" uh and that would be an example of low inhibition or being like impulsive. And then updating is sort of that like cognitive like tracking and kind of like scorekeeping, tracking changes as they occur. So maybe you're playing like strategy game and you're like, "Oh, well, that person did that and that person's going to do this, like, oh, I should do that next," and keeping track of stuff as it changes, even just like keeping track of score. And then perspective taking perspective shifting is whenever you like are able to take in new information about a situation and let that inform and change your perspective, change your take on something. So maybe you're like, you start off the game and you're like, "Oh, I want to like buy this place on Monopoly," or I don't know if anyone plays Catan, but you're like, "Oh, I want to like have the longest road or something," and get points that way. But you could be like, "Okay, that's obviously not working, so we're gonna have to try something else." Okay, so really quickly, because I don't have much time, we're gonna try to play a game. Because I know y'all are wondering, like, "Oh, do I have good executive function? Do I have good inhibition?" Okay, so let's look at this YouTube video. Just read the instructions. Oh, sorry. The instructions were to read what the word says, and yeah, that's it. And I want y'all to do it. Just say it out loud as fast as you can. Faster. Okay, I'm cutting y'all off because I'm short on time. All right, but if you were like really good at reading the actual word versus like maybe you accidentally said the color, that would be an example of good inhibition skills. Okay, and I don't really have time, but some really great strategies for regulating is like acknowledging that cognitive label of what's happening, because even if it is in your head, like that matters because it's in your head. Then taking a breath, moving your body, um, meditating, journaling. Okay, and my takeaway from our Lind interview, I really did notice like the dysregulation, both in the client and in the parent. And I mean, it was upsetting to watch the child get upset, and it was upsetting to watch the mother. And the mother dealt with a lot of it really amazing and did a great job. And sometimes she was struggling. And I was like, it'd be really great to have like a go to, like step one, two, step three of how to deal with the situation. Like, okay, how are you feeling? Tell me about that. Like, okay, I hear you. Yeah, I understand. Let's take a breath. Did anybody yawn? Okay. That can be a trick to like get someone else to yawn, take a deep breath because yawns are infectious. And then like let's go for a walk. So anyway, thank y'all, and like thank you to the family. That was an awesome experience. Let me stop recording.